Well, howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Today, actually the other day, I did a live stream on installing Windows Server 2019 back onto the Dell, Dell with the low power CPU, the L5640 I think it is. Anyway, you'll see it on the video. Today what we're going to do is we're going to complete that Windows Server setup. We're going to install Hyper-V on it. I'm going to show you how to set up shared storage with the Synology Flash Station 1018. It's on loan to us from Sasha over in the UK. So, yeah, what more is there to say? Come on along for the ride. It shouldn't be too long, but it should be very informative. You may learn something in this video. So let's get it started right now. So part one of this was actually a live stream I did a few days ago. So if you missed that, and you want to know how I did it, go back and watch that live stream on getting it installed. And again, I'm going to be installing this on all my units and taking you through on the ride, because you'll see, even though the servers are similar, each one is a little bit different enough to require a little bit different configuration. Now, what I need to do next is do some housekeeping. I need to get my time zone set. I need to get my IP address set. I need to get my server name set, etc. So let's take care of that right now, because right now the server manager is not real pleasing to look at. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over here and click on my time zone. And we're going to change that to Central Time. Tell it OK. And you're going to notice it doesn't change. You have to click the little refresh button. Now, there are 4 Ethernet cards on here, so if I click on any one of these, I like to set these up. I'm very picky about this. Right now, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 gigabit connections and one 10 gig. Now, I like to use my 10 gig connection as my management everything network. That's just how I do it. But I like it to be labeled properly, so the first thing I want to do is label everything. So you just right click. This is the ease of Windows. Just right click on it, come down to rename, and then we'll call this gigabit 10, so that I know just by looking it's a 10 gigabit network adapter. Now these they're not in use, and I'm going to go ahead and disable them because I don't know what actual number on the Ethernet card that is. And then on this one here, I'm going to go ahead and rename that gigabit 1, meaning 1 gigabit connection, and it's connection number 1. Now, the other thing I'm going to do then is disable that, because I don't need that network card working right now. And then I'm going to go back here to Server Manager and refresh the view. Alright, so you see how it's removed the other 4 network adapters, changed my time zone, but we're still using IPv4 with a DHCP address. I don't want to do that. So again, I'm going to click on there, and I know I want this machine to be on a specific IP address. So we double click on the IPv4, and then we just type everything in. This one's going to be at 5.5. Subnet mask get filled in automatically. Our gateway's at 254, and our DNS is at 5.1. And I'm going to go ahead and click on OK, and OK again. Close that, and then refresh the server manager. And now you see we've got our IP address of 5.5. Now the other thing I want to do is I want to change the name of this server. So what I need to do is a couple of things. I could just go out and rename it, but I may have a problem because there's already a server out there with that name. So I'm going to try and go out there and reset that server account and give this one its new name, and see what kind of success we have. So I'll be right back. So as you can see here, I've got quite a few computers. I'm on my Active Directory domain controller. I'm in Active Directory users and computers, as you can see up here, and I'm on computers. Now, you can see I've used these names quite a few times before. Now, normally all you have to do is come up here to the computer name. Don't delete it. You will kick yourself in the pants if you delete it out of Active Directory, because it can cause all kinds of drama later. All I'm going to do is right-click on it and then choose Reset Account. And that should clear out the SID number that Active Directory uses to associate the machine. So now that I've done that, let's come back here and see if I can't give this computer that name. I'm going to click on Change. So I'm going to call it Dell 1-HV. Click on OK. And hopefully it'll tell me there isn't already an account out there. Let's see. I'm hoping it will. If not, it's a little more complicated to get it to work. Yeah, see, you can't rename it to Dell 1HV. The account already exists. So, what I have to do, let me cancel on that. I'm going to here to change, and I'm going to take it out of the work group. I'm just going to join it to some arbitrary work group. And I am going to have to reboot the server in order to get it to join that mcs.local. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to add it to the domain. Alright, so we're booting back up now. You're probably wondering to yourself, why are you using this crappy iDRAC interface to do this? Why don't you use remote desktop? Well, because the stuff that I'm getting ready to do to this computer will break remote desktop, and it's just easier to deal with this little kind of slower, sluggish, as you can see, interface than it is to make a remote desktop connection, then break it, and then, I don't know why. I just thought I'd share that with you. Now, after we change the name, we have to reboot. I'm just going to click on yes here. We're going to have to reboot 2 more times. Once when we change the name, which we're about to do now, and then when we join then we have to reboot, and then when we join the domain again, we have to reboot again. So I will share with you there that I like Linux a lot better from that standpoint. It doesn't require all these reboots. So we're going to call this Dell 1HV. I guess I could have named it something else, but I'm old and set in my ways. So let me reboot again and come back, and then I'll show you how we join the domain, and then I'll show you the steps after that. Alright, so we're getting ready to log in here. So I don't like to share too much personal stuff with people randomly on the internet. I mean, y'all are like family these days, but there's a lot of things I don't share with my family either, come to think of it. My hair is a mess. I'll show you here in a second what I'm talking about. I've never been one for being worried about my clothing, some would call me a slob. I'm not really a slob. I mean, I bathe and keep myself clean, but, my shirts sometimes get little bits of food on them, that kind of thing. And the big thing is, look at this. Look at my hair. Yeah. Well, I'm going bald. I'm nearly 60 years old. It's just, my father was balder than that at my age, so... but I get this real wild hair on the back, and, I'm the king of cheap. I like going to barber shops, but there's always a line at my local barber shop. I just hate it. So I have finally convinced my spouse to try and cut my hair. My spouse even bought the clippers. So hopefully next time you see me tomorrow, this is supposed to happen. My spouse is going to cut my hair I mean, how bad? I told him if you screw it up completely, just shave the head. It's no big deal. I don't mind being bald. It doesn't bother me at all. But, I am starting to get the little wings on the edge of my hair, and I don't like that. Anyway, back to the show already in progress. So, here we are. We're back up again now. Guess what we get to do now? Now we get to try and join the domain again. Hopefully it'll work this time. We'll reboot one more time, and then we can carry on with the configuration. So it's mcs.local is my domain name. And if it works, which I think it will, see, it worked. So it's one of those little glitches in Windows that nobody tells you about, that only years of experience or years of installing Windows you will see that. And that's what a lot of people leave out of their videos too, because I like to show all the mistakes, all the things that could happen, because there's nothing more frustrating than if you're trying to follow along with a video like this one and I leave a step out, or I don't tell you about something that could possibly occur. So hopefully you appreciate that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here again while it reboots, and then we'll come back and do some more configuration. Now, be aware that once you join your server to your Active Directory domain, the first time you log in, it's going to create a profile on that machine for the domain. So I'm going to go up here and enter Control-Alt-Delete. And also be aware that you need to change your login from your default account to your Active Directory domain account, the one that has domain privileges, which is Adama. So now you'll see this says sign in to MCS. Now a lot of people question me, Joe, why do you go ahead and put the MCS and then the backslash in if it already says it's going to sign in? Well, because sometimes Windows lies to you. Sometimes it doesn't actually log you into the domain, especially if a service is not up and running. So that's why I physically put the domain name in with my username. And now you'll notice that it's creating my desktop, and it's going to come up and go into Server Manager. Now you see this is a fairly zippy server, especially I would strongly recommend if you get one of these used servers, you definitely take your CD-ROM drive out of there, get the little adapter tray that I've got a video on it, and put yourself an SSD in there. It just makes your life so much easier, because Windows will thrash a hard drive. A regular hard drive, you're not going to be happy with the performance. So put an SSD in these Windows servers. I don't know if I've ever told anybody that before or not. Brought that point up. Now, what I like to do next is go ahead and install the HyperV role on here, because this is going to be a HyperV. I'm not going to waste all these CPUs and RAM just running Windows Server. So I want to be able to run VMs on here if I so choose. So I need to add the HyperV service. So that's fairly easy. And then once I do that, you'll see what I'm talking about on the IP addresses and how some of the... Pay particular attention to this. Every time I reboot Windows Server 2019, it should always come up and say that the domain Windows Defender firewall is on, and that's what I'm logging on to. But you'll see there's a little glitch in Windows. It may or may not occur during this install, that after you install Hyper-V, you have to come back and you have to do some registry entries to get your DNS to start up before it's complicated. And if it happens, I'll cover it in detail what you need to do. But for now, I'm going to go up here to Manage, and I'm going to add roles and features. I'm going to click on Next. I'm going to do a role-based or feature-based. Click on Next. I'm going to install it on this server. So this is my pool of servers. And I'm going to just simply click on Hyper-V here. I'm going to accept all of these and click on Add Features. This will take a minute or two. And once it comes up and allows you, click on Next. Click on Next here. And click on Next here. Now, one thing you want to make sure you do is select your network adapter so that you'll have connectivity with your virtual machines. And we'll fix this later. We'll come out and fix the description later because it's going to change. Click on Next. Now, this is very important. Since I'm going to have multiple Hyper-V servers, I want to be allowed to send and receive migrations, live migrations of virtual machines. Now, I use CRED SSP. The protocol is less secure. It's in a lab environment. Don't really care. But normally you might want to use Kerberos for this. This just allows this server to talk to another Hyper-V server on the domain and do a live migration of a machine. That's another reason I love Hyper-V, because it's built in, you know? It's not an add-on you have to pay for. It's not another VM you have to spin up to get it to run. It's not a Zen Orchestra that you need to compile from scratch, although it's, you know, it's fun to do. I'm too damn old for it. I just want it to work, and I want to point and click, okay? So I'm going to quit rambling and click on Next. Don't worry about the location for the virtual machines and the virtual hard drives. We'll fix that later. Click on Next and click Install. Now this is going to take, depending upon how fast your machine is, whether you're using an SSD or a spinning hard drive, this could take minutes to tens and 20s of minutes. If you're on spinning rust, it could take a while. And it's going to not automatically reboot because I told it not to, but it will tell you when it needs to reboot the machine. Now, after your initial reboot, it's going to then reboot again. And then after that reboots in, we'll be able to log back in and make some changes. So I'm just going to pause the video here, let this run, and I'll come back when something important happens. So as I said, it will let you know when a reboot is required, and it even tells you a restart is pending on Dell 1 HV. You must restart the destination server to finish the installation. So I'm going to click on Close, and then you'll get the little notification up here as well. So I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to power cycle the machine, restart it. Alright, so we're coming back after our initial install of HyperV, and you're going to watch what happens. So it's still working on features. If there was one little thing I would tell Microsoft, please limit the number of reboots that are required, and you're going to see it's going to reboot the server again. Now they do this for a reason, because they don't want anything left over running in the background that would prevent you from utilizing the server or chasing, going down a rabbit hole. So there's a reason Windows reboots all the time when it does stuff like this, and that is because evidently in their lab environment or during their testing, they found out that it was probably necessary or a good idea to do that. So, and that's another good reason to have an iDRAC controller or an IMM controller on your server, which is what these are, because it gives you that ability of being able to do all this stuff from a remote terminal without having to pull a machine out, put it on the bench, hook up a monitor, hook up a keyboard, or wheel a keyboard and monitor over there. And for that matter, my server room could be an extension hundreds of miles away, and I still have the ability to do this. So even if you were using a hosted system on a rack in somebody else's data center, as long as you have internet connectivity and an iDRAC or an IMM adapter, that kind of thing, or whatever Supermicro uses, you'll be able to then connect up remotely, which is going to be very important. The majority of my business, I would say 80% of it now, is done remotely. It's not that often I have to go to a client site because I've got them configured so I can, unless their internet goes down, something critical like that, I can get into them. And then if I need to go to a customer site, I can go. We have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week support. So if something fails at 10 o'clock on a Sunday, I got to get my butt in my car and go take care of it. That's my job. So it makes it handy to have this remote access. It has saved me quite a few times. So as long as you get a steady internet connection, you should be good. All right, so we're coming up on our second reboot, and this time it should allow us to log in, and then I can show you what gets broken. Now, part of the reason I'm doing this is, like I said, this machine is the unit with 6 3.5-inch drive bays, and I've got a huge investment in 4 terabyte, 3 terabyte, and 2 terabyte 3.5-inch drives. The idea behind all this is to consolidate as much of my stuff down as I can and run it on these big, powerful servers, but efficiently. So I will end up putting 4 terabyte and 3 terabyte and 2 terabyte drives in this machine, setting up a drive share with DriveBender so that I can pool the drives together. And that will end up being probably my media server. As far as storage goes, it will be my media server. So all my videos and audio and that thing will come over and be on here. They're not real critical files. And then this machine can serve as a backup as well to my Synology NAS, 2 of them, which I trust for my data, but you still need backups, and I still need an offsite backup. So this allows me kind of to fulfill that task. And then this in turn will free up my media server, that Ryzen 5 1600, so I could use it for other things. So, but back to the configuration. So watch what has happened now. and see if you can spot it. Okay, this is correct. It does say domain, but you notice right down here, it has given it took my short little nice complete name and gave it something else completely. And you notice the other thing it did is it assigned an IP address by DHCP. Why, oh why, Microsoft does this do that? I don't know, but we're going to fix it. I'm just going to click on this here. And then this is the now, it creates a, whenever you install Hyper-V, it creates a virtual Ethernet adapter. So this is the one that actually gets the IP address. This is the one we need to change, not the gigabit 10. We want to leave that alone. But what I'm going to do first is rename this because that is just too damn long. So I'm going to call this gigabit 10 dash vert. So I know it's the virtual gigabit connector or 10 gig connector. Now the other thing I'm going to do is fix the IP address. So I'm going to right click, go to properties, go to TCP IP. Now try to do this under Linux. Good luck. So we know we want this to be 5.5, right? And it should fill in our subnet mask for us. It's already filled in our gateway. Let's put in our IP address of our DNS server, and I have local DNS. And then I'm going to click on OK and OK. However, another glitch, okay? Right click on it, go to status, and then go to details. And then look what's wrong here. What is it missing? It's missing the gateway, right? Yeah, another little glitch in Windows. I don't know why they do this. But you have to right click, go to properties, come in here again, and manually enter the gateway address. Then click on OK and OK. Now this time when you right click and go to status, all should be well, and you'll see now you have internet connectivity as well. Let me close that. See, now it says internet up here. Before it said no network access. Now I'm going to close this, and then I'm going to refresh this screen. Now it appears we got off fairly easy because sometimes what it'll do when it installs Hyper-V is it will delay some of these services that the Windows firewall depends on, and you'll get, instead of it coming up saying domain on, it'll say private or public on. So it doesn't realize it's on a domain, part of an Active Directory domain. So now that that's done, now what I want to do is enable my remote desktop. So I'm going to click on that and allow remote desktop connections. I'm going to tell it OK. What it's telling me there is it's going to open a port on the firewall to allow remote desktop in. I'm going to apply it, tell it OK, and then I'm going to refresh. So now it should say remote desktop enabled. Now let's go connect via remote desktop. So here we are now back using RDP. You'll see, I don't know why we have a good connection. It's good. It's not great, even though it's on 10 gigabit networking. All right, well that's fine. What I don't need right now is Server Manager to come up. So I'm going to come up Manage, go to Server Manager. I don't want Server Manager to start automatically at logon. I'm going to tell that OK, and then I'm going to exit out of it. What I do want to go into is Windows Update. So you just click on your Windows button, go to the gear icon, and then under here you'll have Update and Security. Go ahead and check for updates. Now you need to go ahead and run all the updates. Always keep your Windows Server updated when they come out. I have yet to have, and I probably shouldn't say this, knock on wood and whatever else, I have yet to have a Windows 2019 server update to foobar system. In other words, I've never had a problem with any of the Windows Server updates, but I wait about a week after they come out before I apply them. But for the context of this video, I want you to run all the updates so that we're on the same piece of paper when we come out on the other side of the updates and I show you some further configuration. So we'll let this run, and run it is, once it runs, reboot. Run it again and again and again until it tells you there are no updates left. So even though these updates are running, let's just continue on. This last update will install and we'll be good. The first thing I want to do is come down to the Start menu, and I'm going to bring HyperV Manager, drag it onto the desktop, and let's see, Scuzzy Initiator, we want that on the desktop, and I think I'll do Server Manager, just so I can launch it. Yeah, Server Manager is there, but it's not under here. There it is. Let's drag it onto the desktop and then align them. Alright, now the first thing I need to do is go out and format my the second half of my SSD drive. So I right click on the Start menu, go to Disk Management, and then we'll let that come up, and then we'll create a partition for our virtual machines. So I just right clicked and did a new partition, give it full size. Drive letter G is fine. Actually, maybe drive letter V. Yeah, V. I'm going to do REFS. And we'll discuss V machine. Perform a quick format, finish. So now I have a default location where I can put my virtual machine files instead of on the C drive. So now we can close out of that. I don't need to format the disk. But I do want to go under HyperV Manager, and I want to change some settings there. Alright. And the first one I'm going to change is, I right click and go to HyperV Settings. So the first thing I'm going to do is change this over to the V drive. So delete that and leave that. So V, Hyper-V, virtual hard disk, and then this one, we'll change that to V, Hyper-V. And that should work. 2 live migrations, so all should be well now with that. And the other thing we want to do is go to the virtual switch manager, and I want to change this name to gigabit 10-vert. That way it's got a human readable component to it. I know at a glance that that works. So we now have our path set up for our virtual machines, so we're good there. Now, one of the things I love about Windows is I'm just going to right click on the Start menu, go to Task Manager. I love the Task Manager in Windows. It tells you so much of what's going on. I'm going to come here and break out all my CPUs here so you can see them. It tells me what memory is in use by what, the Ethernet, and then I've even got my processes here, that all these Windows programs that are running in the background. So right now, just booted up, we're using 5 gig of RAM. And that's a bit misleading. If this machine was a server with only 4 gig of RAM and I had a Windows 2019 on it, it would consume about 2.5, 3 gig of RAM. Sometimes as low as 2 gig of RAM. So it bases how much RAM it uses. I guess it's kind of dynamic depending on how much system memory your server has. So because I have a giga of RAM, it's going to use a lot of it for just running background processes, and that's fine. That's why we have lots of RAM. That's why we have lots of CPU power, is because, by God, we want to use it. So, and on the processes, you can sort by memory usage, and or sort by CPU usage. So, but I just find it's handy to have this running. I'll just give you an idea of what's going on. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the Windows firewall. Now, I want to correct my stance on the Windows firewall. I say leave it active. Before I would say turn it off. It just complicates your life. And it was true then. It's not true now. They've really improved the Windows firewall. It's very easy to configure. There is no reason not to turn it on. It's just an extra layer of protection. If something gets loose on your home network, it could prevent you from getting infected. It could prevent you them from turning on services and turning you into a bot. So yeah, leave it turned on. There's no reason not to anymore. If you have a specific application that needs to work through Windows Firewall, you can do a Google search on it, and I guarantee you will find an answer as to how to enable that app through Windows Firewall, or you could just go down to the port level and enable the ports. So keep the Windows Firewall turned on. That's good advice, I think. The other thing is be prepared for failure. I always used to complain it's easy to screw up Linux if you don't know what you're doing. Well, you can screw up Windows too if you start going too deep or doing things without a little planning ahead of time. So every operating system has its learning curve. So if you're new to Windows, then pay close attention to what you're doing. If you're new to Windows Server, though, but you're familiar with Windows, you shouldn't have any problem at all. There's just some new stuff to learn. But be prepared to learn. Now, the other thing I want Windows Server running Hyper-V to have access to is some fast shared storage. So this is the Synology Flash Station 1018 on loan from Sasha, and it is full of SSD drives. Granted, they're old SSD drives, and, you know, whatever. They suit my purpose. But what I'm going to do is set up shared storage on here so I can share it between all my servers. Now, I have not tested, nor am I familiar with multipathing, I believe it's called. So what I'm going to do, and it's probably going to shoot myself in the foot, but I'm learning as you are, especially when it comes to iSCSI, because I really don't use it that often, but it's easier than using NFS for permissions, etc., and sharing your virtual machines. Getting those right under Windows is a little complex. You have to go to the command line to do it. And Synology does not support SMB shares because the version of Samba 4 is not compatible with all the features of SMB 3, which are needed in order to store virtual machines on an SMB share, which is what I would prefer. So I have to set up an iSCSI share. That means I have to carve out a piece of my shared storage on my Synology for each server that is going to connect to it. But I believe if once I figure out multipathing, I can have all 3 or 4 servers sharing the same iSCSI share. But I just haven't quite wrapped my head around how that happens yet. So this video could change. Anyway, I'm going to go to the iSCSI manager on my Synology. And I have a target already ready, Dell HV, but I have a LUN available. So I'm in good shape here. Now, all I did was create one. Just follow the wizard that goes along. It gives you an IQN number. You'll need to pay attention to that. I modified mine so that it had the FS1018 Dell 1-HV in the IQN. And then I set up a LUN, and I set aside about 300 gig of storage space, and it's ready to go. So as you can see right here, it's ready. There are none connected, but there is one healthy. So what I'm going to do now is come over to my Windows Server virtual machine, and first thing I want to do is go to iScuzzy Initiator, and it tells me the service is not running, service is required. Do I want to start it now and have it start automatically? Well, heck yeah, I do. So we'll tell it yes. And then we should be able to come up, and what we're going to do first is a discovery. So come over to Discovery and click on Discover Portal and type in the IP address of your Synology NAS. In my case, it's 5.17. Click on OK. And then once you get the portal in there, you can come back to Targets, and you should see your target in there. If you don't, click the refresh button. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect, and I'm going to add this connection to the list of favorites. And what that'll do is it'll make it automatically restore the connection every time the computer restarts. That's very important, especially if you have any virtual machines that start on boot. So I'm going to click OK here. It shows me it's connected, and I'm going to click OK. So now I'm going to come down here to File Manager, and we're going to go to that iScuzzy we just created. Wait a minute. Where is it? We created it, but we have not connected to it. Remember, iScuzzy treats it as a block level device. So that means we have to go under Disk Management. So we'll come back to the Windows Start Manager, go to Disk Management, bring it up, give it a minute, and you'll see that we now have a 300 gig hard drive available to us, but it's offline. So we need to come down here, right click, tell it online, and you'll see now that it says it's iScuzzy. It's already been formatted. So what we need to do is assign a drive letter. So let's right click on it, go to change drive letter and path, add one, and I'm going to add drive letter I for iScuzzy. Click OK. Oh, parameter is not correct. Well, that means we're going to have to do something a little bit different then. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to format. And I'm going to format it as REFS. Tell it OK. Now let's see if we can add a drive letter. Nope, still says the parameter is incorrect. Well, this is interesting. Let me delete the volume. Completely start from scratch. Do simple volume next. I want drive letter I, REFS, call it iScuzzy, finish, and it has formatted it. So now we can get out of there. Now let's see if we can see the drive. And we can, and it's quite empty, so that's good. Now what I want to do is tell HyperV to create the virtual machines there by default. So we'll bring up HyperV. Again, we'll right click on it, go to HyperV settings, and we'll change this to drive letter I. Now that doesn't mean you can't still put virtual machines on the G drive or the V drive. It just means by default they're going to go to the iScuzzy drive. So you still have this 113 gig free for some small virtual machines that you might need to make that need to run quicker than your iScuzzy will. But you also have the ability to put your virtual machines here on the iScuzzy share. So there you go. So there you go, YouTube. Soup to nuts setup on getting HyperV set up on Windows Server 2019. And I've tried to share some of the things that you might run into if you're trying to install HyperV on one of these servers. Also, we set up shared storage with the Synology NAS. Now, my preference would have been to use NFS. But there's a little problem with permissions on NFS using it with Windows, so and I need to overcome that. But for now, we've set up an iScuzzy share. We're just going to have to live with the fact that I have to set up an individual LUN for each Windows server that's going to use this shared storage, but no big deal. Again, I would prefer to use NFS. Again, we hope you found the video entertaining and informative. We got some more videos coming up in the Windows Lab series. We're actually going to put Unky Joe's Playhouse in a lab environment and pretend that Unky Joe's Playhouse is a client of my company, and how I would go about setting them up with a virtual environment to get their work done, including email and shared files and all that kind of stuff. So you got that to look forward to. Again, thanks for coming to see us. Donate if you're so inclined. We take PayPal. We take Patreon. I'm sorry, I can't speak today. We're also mirroring our content over at librarylbry.tv, so you can check us out over there. The link is down in the About section and in the Notes section down below. So please don't forget to come back and see us again. And don't forget, we'll see you on the other side.